order. All rise and please pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Already lost it. Okay, the first order of business will be the adoption of the agenda. Oh, you don't have an agenda. One moment.
Okay, I move that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Wait a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we adopted the agenda. I lost my copy of the agenda. Okay. Anyhow, okay, moving on, minutes. January 26th, we'll pass out in advance. Are there any corrections?
Some typos with names.
The typos which, you corrected them? Yeah, you corrected those. Yeah, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the minutes.
I so move.
Second.
Motion's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We'll get to the interesting part. Our first item here is going to be a discussion concerning the item that is coming up in the public hearing. And this is going to be a discussion amongst the board members because we have to make a decision on how we're going to handle this. There are some issues that have come up with the application and some conflicts perhaps with the code in regards to that. So this is going to be a discussion amongst the board members, and we need to bring in Mike.
Please, sir.
Mike Lockaby, who is the attorney for the board, will be a part of the discussion, but there will be no public comment on this part of the discussion.
Mike, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
Can you turn it this way or get it up on the screen?
No, this is gonna be as good as it gets for the
This is the best we can do.
Mr. Chairman, who is this again on the?
Mike Lockaby, who is the attorney for the BZA.
Thank you.
BZAs end up having to have their own attorneys. So there's several ways we can do this. And the board can decide. There is a motion that's been prepared to deal with this, and I can introduce the motion,
Which one is this?
and then the discussion can center on the motion, or we can go through the issues that have brought us to this point. But in the end, I think it's going to come down to a motion, and the motion has been worded with the appropriate code references and everything, because it's important that what action we take is well represented as far as,
But I think it's,
Being
I
concise,
think it'd be important to pass by our council the other ideas with respect to their lack of viability perhaps, or viability, that there are other questions that we have, and I think
okay,
it's a good motion. We should wait until we've gone, figure out what we're talking about.
okay, well then let's,
Well, as I understand it, Mr. Lockaby, the issue has to do with whether or not the definition of kennel in the, and I could be, this is wrong to motion, so I'm stepping in here.
no, that's what we need.
The definition of kennel in the Rappahannock zoning ordinance is sufficient to include a dog training facility, and that, do you have that definition?
Yeah.
And it would be my reading that it would be a permitted use.
Well, while we're looking, may I pose a quick question? We have a business exactly like the business proposed that already exists in the county, and it got there without any special use permit whatsoever. How does that bear on this?
My
Well,
understanding is
We don't necessarily know, I can't tell you knowing the history of that, but certainly if it's in the same zoning district, if it had exactly the same history, that certainly could be instructed to the board.
Right, well, one of my questions is that if this is grandfathered in because then the code changed sometime in the interim, and this person got, the existing business got to be there and has been there long enough to make it unassailable as a business, that if that only includes that business or that type of business?
It only includes that particular business. If you can have something that's completely illegal, but if you pay taxes on that building for 15 years, it's there and there's not much that can be done about it. And this might be one of those situations. It also just might be a situation where all the statutes of limitations have passed and there's not, again, much that can be done about it. I don't know about the comparison, but based upon what Chairman Makla has told me, there is certainly a strong comparison there if it's an identical facility.
But excuse me, go ahead.
He and I talked at great length about the definition of a kennel, and it seems to me that it turns on the idea of keeping. Are animals kept at the training facility? And that was, if they're not kept, then it doesn't meet the definition. And if they are kept, then it does. And you can argue whether training is keeping.
Let me ask you this. Let's say I get a call from a teacher, and the teacher says to me, I kept your son in school yesterday. I take it that my son is not being boarded at that school. I mean, the definition of kept is custodial, but it's not necessarily overnight.
but there is, the definition of kept when it comes to animals, there is a definition of kept with animals that's more specific, so it doesn't really apply to all cases. And,
I don't think that's true.
well, then,
So one
Okay.
situation you could say is that you could require a doggy daycare to be part of the facility at all times, in which case they would at least be keeping dogs during the daytime.
But as we understand it, the dogs come and go with the clients, and are never left at the site at all. And that's the same way as it happens at the site, the similar site that exists in Amosville now.
Yeah, I mean, you could argue that there's a boundary fence, and the dogs, when they enter the facility, are kept within that boundary fence.
I think kept is an awfully small, narrow nail to hang a hat on here.
Fauquier's code had a similar issue, and they modified it to include training as part of the definition of a kennel. And I think if that was the case for us, to where we had different language in our ordinance, it would be easier for us to make a decision. Especially considering 170-16, which states that it is the intent of the chapter that any use not expressly indicated as permitted use in a separate zoning district is prohibited.
Yeah, but here you have any place so designated that dogs are kept for the purpose of sale, rental, boarding, breeding, hire, or other property, or any commercial purpose or economic venture. I mean, my God, you can drive a truck through that. And you can sure drive a dog training facility through that.
And that's what I was thinking was that those definitions of commercial purpose or economic venture is very broad. So it turns on what you think the word custody. Does it mean that it has to be out of the custody and control of the owner? As in it has to move into the custody and control of the facility for at least some period of time? Or does it mean, as some of you might decide, it means to you to be kept overnight? When you're interpreting a term in code, you use the usual or ordinary meaning of the term. And I can't imagine a group of people who are more experts on the usual meaning of that term in Rappahannock County than you. So you'll have to come up with that.
Also, in reference to 16, the permitted uses, there is case law, and some of it comes out of Fauquier County, that caused Fauquier County to have to include the term training in their definition of kennel because a similar situation came up, and the court said no, you can't add, because the codes are legislative process. You can't come back as a board or something like that and add another term onto the definitions of the code, because at that point you're taking on a legislative aspect, and that's not allowed.
But we don't have to do that because the definition in our code is so broad.
Yeah, and this is one thing I'm wondering, if for any commercial purposes and contained, if somebody has a number of dogs and has puppies and wants to sell them, they have to come to us to get a permit to do so because they have a fence around their yard? I think that's just a little bit too much.
Is it
I mean,
our
how
job
narrow
to
is the road?
rewrite? Is it our job to rewrite the ordinance?
We can't rewrite it.
Well,
We can
the
ask.
ordinance is what the ordinance is.
Well, we could table this and allow it to be, perhaps go to the supervisors to perhaps change the ordinance. That is an option, but I think based on the way things are now, me personally, it would be hard for me to approve this based on, it doesn't match the definition of the ordinance. It's expressly prohibited by the fact that it's not included in the ordinance. And so I think those are really, from my
But
perspective.
how is it not
I can
included? Why is it not an
Because you
economic
can, just like you said, you could drive a truck through it, so you could say you could do, if you're just narrowly focusing on commercial, or any commercial purpose or economic venture,
Yeah.
that could be
No,
any.
it has to be related to dogs or cats.
No, but you have to read in our code, 170-16, permitted uses states that if they aren't permitted by wording in the code, then They're
But
not
you're right,
permitted.
it's circular, because what is permitted by a special use permit is a kennel. And if a kennel includes dog training, then in fact, it is permitted by special use.
Yes, but our definition, our specific definition of the code does not include the words dog training.
I know, what it does include is dogs and commercial enterprise.
This
Right.
was
That's
copied from
obviously
Fauquier.
economic
It's
development.
exactly what Fauquier said before they had to make their amendment.
They were required by, I think there's, it was a court
I would
decision
have
that
to read
required
that
that
case
change.
to see what it was that they were exactly deciding.
Mr. Chairman, since this is,
No, I'm sorry.
may I interpose just a question?
Okay.
If the chair will indulge me. Since I recognize this is a discussion among the board members and council, but since this discussion arises in the context of a specific application before you this evening, could I ask the chair to indulge me just 2 minutes for a comment?
Is that board? Okay, board,
The point I would want to make is this, Mr. Chairman. This is not a determination that this board is called upon to make tonight. The zoning administrator under our Rappahannock County Code is empowered and in fact called upon to interpret the provisions of the zoning ordinance. The Albemarle handbook that everyone is so fond of speaks to this, but the code itself speaks to this. It's in 170-127 of the code. And I mean, that's one of her primary duties that's enumerated in that code section. In this case, Ms. Summers had this question before her in August of last year. She interpreted the zoning ordinance in the manner that she did that's set out in her letter of August 20th. If the applicant or if someone or the property owner had been aggrieved by that decision, they had the ability and the opportunity to appeal that decision to this board, in which case I would submit this would be an appropriate discussion this evening. But that didn't happen. And as a result of that, her decision in this context is what the code and the case law refers to as a thing decided at this point. And again, I'd encourage you to look at section 14-3 of the Albemarle handbook if you have that available. And it talks about this concept of thing decided, that once she's made that determination, there's been no appeal. In fact, at this point, that decision cannot even be overturned by the court. It's settled. So I would simply urge the board to consider that this is something that's already been a thing decided by your zoning administrator in the exercise of her obligations as zoning administrator. And we need to move on to the public hearing. But thank you for indulging me. I appreciate it.
Mr. Lockerbie, could you hear what you were saying?
Is that Mr. Goff?
No, that's Mr. Brown. Mike Brown.
Okay, Mr. Brown. It's not actually a thing decided because the appeal notice was not given. Did you have, in order for that 30-day time period to start running, the item needs to be, the zoning administrator needs to give notice to the recipients of the letter that they have 30 days to appeal. So that's actually still an open question. It also related to a different piece of property, even though it was a similar use. And so certainly that's not the issue that's before the BZA tonight, but it certainly remains an open question. And one option the BZA has tonight is that it could either deny the application or defer the application so that the applicant could appeal that decision to the BZA and bring it back in a different posture where the BZA would have that question of the correctness of the zoning administrator's opinion before it.
But why would
Does
she
that
do
make
that? I mean, she has no incentive to appeal a decision that's in her favor. Be frank with you.
Anybody who's aggrieved by a decision can appeal it in theory. So
Okay, okay.
it doesn't need to be the person to whom the letter is addressed. It can be anybody who's affected by the letter. So, for instance, if the letter said you need to go get a special permit, when in fact you think that the use should be by right based
another,
But without, okay, so, but at this point, there's really no reason for the appeal. I mean, we're not gonna, the BZA is not gonna appeal our own zoning administrator's decision. Right?
Correct, one of the people needs to appeal it to you. But the zoning administrator's opinion remains an open question. And that with respect to this particular piece of property, you are in a position to decide whether or not you think that the definition applies to this particular special permit application.
I object to being asked to permit this on the basis of something that's not even being asked to happen. I mean, I don't see any kennel going on here, and the fact that we're requiring him to get a permit for a kennel is kind of troublesome.
Well, I agree, and that's why I believe the ordinance should address what, you know, what our standards should be for a dog training facility.
Yeah, we need, I don't think we have enough data to compute, really.
and plus we have in 170-49, that neither the BZA nor the board shall have the authority to vary, modify, or waive any of the regulations or standards prescribed for any use or purpose for which a special permit or a special exemption is required. The discretion of the BZA and the board shall be limited to determinations with respect to the standards applying to the use or purpose covered by the application. And what has happened in this is that the applicant was required to apply for a kennel permit, but it was immediately told upon application that she would not be allowed to have a kennel. And to my thinking is that is a modification of the standard, and that the words have been removed from the standard in her case.
No, it's not the standard.
And so we are being required to vote on a modified standard.
No, the standard and the definition are two different things. Right? The standards
I
are
believe
like
the
the
definitions are
standards
part
that-
of the standard, because the words in the standard are defined in a separate part of the ordinance, but they are part of the standard. So the word kennel appears in the standard, and it's defined elsewhere, but that definition has been changed.
The definition has not been changed. You know, the definition is dogs, you know, for any commercial purpose or any economic venture that are, you know, are kept in the custody.
Well, they also are not kept.
They're always in the custody of their owners. I don't think the owner transfers custody
They're
to the.
within the boundary line of the property for which.
But when they walk them in town, do they transfer ownership to the town?
It's not a boundary,
I mean, even
it's not a premise.
But what if they took it to the football field that's bounded? And all of a sudden it belongs to, their dogs belong to the school or
The
something?
purpose of
or-
taking the dog is to get it trained
Right.
by this person.
I think this looks like an
Equivalent you-
educational institution to me.
No, there is no transfer. The owner, 90% of the time, 95% of the time, is with the dog the entire time that they're on the premises.
The point
There's
is,
no
If the dog
transfer.
gets out, it's not going to be the owner's responsibility, it's going to be the petitioner's.
I would question that. I would question that, in that if you take your dog onto somebody else's property and the dog
It's
is
not
away,
somebody else's property, it's a property that is designed for the training of dogs, where you give your dog over, in essence, for the training of the profession.
I think essentially you're training the person as much as the dog. In fact, you might look at
Correct.
this as an educational institution
Okay, they're
which,
both in the
excuse me,
custody
in
of-
which dogs are incidental
They're both,
process.
he's the custodian of both.
You know,
keeping people.
In the interest of time, if we are going to have a special, a
let's
public
move
hearing, are we going, is someone gonna make a motion with respect to this?
I
Or-
will, you know, I was basically responsible for the motion being put together, and I will place, you know, a motion on the table and ask for a second.
I will second.
Do we know what the motion is?
Yeah, can you read the motion?
Okay, this is the place date, so, whereas Charlotte Taylor wishes to operate a dog training facility and applied for a permit to operate a kennel pursuant to Code 170-36E and 170-66A, special use permit application number 211202, and whereas County Code 170-8D defines a kennel as any place so designated that dogs and cats and other household pets cannot escape, and where any number of animals are kept for the purpose of sale, rental, boarding, breeding, hire as guard dogs on other property, or for any commercial purpose or economic venture, or for animals in excess of 5 or 1 year of age in a pet shop or an animal shelter as defined herein, and whereas County Code 170-16A, permitted uses, states that it is the intent of the chapter that any use not expressly indicated as a permitted use in a separate zoning district is prohibited, except as qualified in 170-17 and 170-80 below. And whereas County Code 170-49A states neither the BZA nor the board shall have the authority to vary, modify, or waive any of the regulations or standards prescribed for any use or purpose for which a special permit or special exemption is required. The discretion of the BZA and the board shall be limited to determinations with respect to the standards applying to the use or purpose covered by the application. And whereas the training of dogs at a kennel is not expressly included in the definition of kennel in the County Code 170-8, nor is it specifically listed as a permitted use in County Code 170-36, and it is the consensus of the board that these provisions of the current ordinance do not authorize the BZA to approve the application. The application is hereby tabled to give the applicant an opportunity to request a text amendment to the definition of kennel in County Code 170-8 and corresponding amendments to the County Code 170-66A from the Board of Supervisors, following which the application can be taken off the table and go forward to public hearing. The Secretary of the Board has requested to transmit this resolution to the Board of Supervisors and to the Planning Commission, passed by a majority vote of the Board of Zoning Appeals of Rappahannock County, Virginia, regular monthly public meeting on Wednesday, February 23rd, 2022, by the following vote. So that is the motion. And
Can we get the zoning administrator a moment to respond to this?
get that, if the board wants to get that, yes, that's up to the board. So do we want to include the comment from the administrator or zoning administrator who wants to speak? I'm not hearing it again. Or do we just?
I heard a second from Mr.
I would second.
Oh, I wasn't looking for a motion on it, I was just looking for consensus, okay. So do we have consensus that you can address a question to whoever wants to speak, the zoning administrator or the, yes, very. County administrator.
Mr. Curry, do you have a response?
Well, Mr. Fraser asked me to ask you to repeat that, but I won't do that.
As was pointed out, this is the purview of the zoning administrator who has waded into this territory and made a determination. No, it did not have the appeal language, and it is therefore not right before the BZA to consider this at this time. At some point in time, it might be right for the BZA to consider it, but it is not. It's not your appeal. It's not your purview to question what the definition is, in my mind. I'm not a lawyer. I would say there's a lot of discussion over what kept means. There's a lot of discussion that Fauquier went through an effort to change their ordinance to include the words training and grooming and a few other things. And lo and behold, what word did they use together with those? Kept.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean that kept only means boarding or something. And so plainly read in our ordinance, the definition very clearly states that any other commercial, and I've actually dialogue here for you very carefully,
Yeah.
ready, just so you can understand the plain words of the ordinance, as has already been interpreted by the zoning administrator.
to say, any place so designated that dogs cannot escape and where any number of animals are kept for the purpose of any commercial purpose or economic venture, eliminating the superfluous language here. Now you can add any number of other terms to that superfluous language, training, grooming, juggling, whatever you want to do. But if it's a commercial purpose or economic venture, it's included in this definition, whether you think it's the common definition of kennel or not. And kept has got nothing to do with it.
I agree.
That's staff's perspective, and we'll enter that information into the public hearing if one occurs.
Can I ask you a question? By this definition, it looks like if I was breeding dogs on my property and they couldn't get out, that I would have to get a permit. Is this what we're saying? I would be selling them puppies.
Perhaps. If it's a commercial venture and you're breeding dogs for a commercial purpose,
And you don't
you
think
might
this
need
is an owners thing to put upon the people of this county?
whether it's onerous and appropriate is not the purview of this body, that's the
No,
purview
no,
of the
I'm just asking
legislative
you
body.
personally.
I'm not the zoning administrator. However, I would say, if it fits in this definition, it is a kennel, and therefore in certain zoning districts, it wouldn't require a special use permit,
Right, well,
whether we like it or not.
right,
Those two words in the
I
book.
see what you're saying. It seems untenable, but that's the rule. We have to
Yeah.
follow that, right? Okay.
We can tell the planning commission, work on the ordinance.
I
But
think
the ordinance is the ordinance.
right.
The definition is the definition.
And either we have to act on it or send it back for clarification.
Mr. Lockaby, could you hear the county administrator?
Yes, I could.
Can you comment on that?
I'm not sure that there's any way to read this other than to say that it has to be any place so designed that dogs, cats, and other household pets cannot escape, part one, and where any number of animals are kept for the purpose of, et cetera, or for any commercial purpose or economic adventure. So you have several things that need to be occurring at the same time there. And regardless of how you read it, the question that comes to mind is are animals being kept at this facility? And the zoning administrator has given an opinion that is not final and that relates to, I believe, to a different tax parcel. So it's nice, it's very interesting. It has probably about the same weight as the existing facility with no special permit that has long existed under we don't know what circumstances, but it's another tax parcel where the same thing is going on.
Also agricultural
Well,
zone.
you're kind of presented with a situation right now where you're trying to decide whether even to put this on the agenda for a public hearing, or continue with the agenda of the public hearing, to hear more about it and decide what conditions to put down. Or there's a motion that's currently on the floor, which is a motion to ask the board of supervisors to clarify what its legislative intent was, because it's unclear. Another alternative, as I said, was either to defer or deny and allow an appeal to you of the zoning administrator's decision elsewhere, although that would be, again, a bit odd given that it's not, again, as I understand it, it's not exactly the same tax parcel. So it creates, you have several different options before you. You can go to public hearing and hear more from everybody involved. You can table it to hear more from everybody involved, or you can table it and ask the board of supervisors to please clarify what's going on and what its intent was when it adopted this provision. And at a certain point, it comes down to whether you believe that this use meets this definition such that you can impose conditions on it, or you can impose conditions on it to force it to meet this definition. Again, I mentioned one particular possibility is that one of the conditions is that they do have to have doggy daycare and boarding open and functioning at all times. If you included, I think all of you were at some level of consensus that if there were day boarding, animals would be deemed kept. So if you required them to have day boarding on premises at all times, I think you've all agreed that that would be something for which you could issue a special permit. The question is whether the animal remains under the primary custody and control of the owner, whether that continues to meet it, and whether that's clear enough to you that you feel like you can move forward with a public hearing to decide what conditions to apply.
I'm not really comfortable requiring people to have a business that they have no intent to have. I don't think that that's really a tenable way to resolve the problem, is saying you have to, you know, enter into a whole new business. That doesn't seem reasonable.
As you move forward and deliberate, I want to make sure you're clear
wait a minute.
on this requirements of 17055F, which states the BZA or board shall render a decision on all applications for special permits, special exceptions respectively, no later than 90 or 120 days respectively following the first meeting at which the application was on the agenda. It's on the agenda. You can't lay this on the table forever. Must be decided within 90 days.
How long has it been now? Just now?
Today.
Starts today.
What happened to her?
It's very unlikely the Board of Supervisors will modify the ordinance within 90 days.
Can you respond to that, Walker?
Yeah, that language has actually been interpreted in the Supreme Court of Virginia case. It has to do with, and that language is considered to be directory, not mandatory, which means that if the Board of Zoning Appeals doesn't lose control of the application because it doesn't make a decision today. If the applicant really wants a decision today, then the applicant can probably insist on it. If the applicant is willing to waive that and the BZA wants to waive that, then the BZA can defer the item in order to have further information provided to it.
Okay, and a question on 170-49 as far as the issue on varying, waiving, or modifying. With what we're going through and the changes that are being made, and that there are changes to the code which we are not allowed to do. I'm asking you to let me ask and give an answer. Is it relevant? Is that part of the code relevant to this issue?
The degree of relevance there, that's really, it's a restatement of a basic principle of state law, that the function of a BZA is not to write ordinances, it's to interpret ordinances. And under circumstances where it's acting in a legislative capacity to, on a special permit, to make decisions applying the criteria and factors that are given to it by the Board of Supervisors. So you can't make it, it's telling you that you can't add a use to a district that the district doesn't contain. You don't have the authority to say, well, I think it's wrong that the setbacks in this district are 20 feet. I think we should have them be 10, so we're going to let somebody have one that's 10. You guys have to follow the rules. So that's the primary thing. Although certainly you can read the plain language if you believe that it expresses a legislative intent for you to be stricter than you even might normally be, then that's certainly a reading that you, reading the plain language as the people having to sit there and raise their hands and make the decision, it can make.
Okay, we having any other questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman, you have a motion and a second.
If there are no further questions or comments, I'll put the question to a roll call vote.
Would you mind rereading the motion?
Sure. We all want to hear it.
Oh, I got that.
Okay, whereas Charlotte Taylor. Oh, you're going to read it. Okay.
hearing?
You have to read it out loud, and we've all read it out loud, and you just want clarification,
Yeah.
just go to it.
Sorry, please, no public discourse. The order is
So is it also part, we've got this motion, but it is also a decision to be made whether or not we have a public hearing now?
Right.
no.
And- No,
Well,
why not?
We will not go forward with the public hearing because we are tabling takes precedence over any other,
Is that true, Mr. Lockaby?
that's Robert's Rules of Order.
I'm sorry, ma'am, I was looking at the 90-day provision to make sure that I had the case name in case I was asked for it. What,
Does a motion to table take precedence? Under Robert's Rules
The
of Order.
question was whether we could have a public hearing. I mean, we've got a lot of people who have
Yeah.
come out tonight.
you can certainly have a public hearing, you could withdraw the motion to table and come back after the public hearing if that's what you would like to do. But right now, if you're doing the adoption of the agenda, then you could simply take this off the agenda and defer it to a later date. You could also have the public hearing and rather than make a decision, defer it to a later
It's
date.
a recess.
Right. But
Yeah.
if we have the public hearing, we are going to be required to make a decision.
Right,
But
well, let's
that's
just
not what you
withdraw
said.
the motion for now and have the public hearing, and then we'll see if after we hear what the public has to say, if we really want to have the motion. It's only fair to give them the voice. I think we
Well,
should-
I
think that's important. We want to get
I think
this-
that's important, but we may be having a public hearing on some, this is getting real confusing
But I just
because,
heard what he said.
What?
He said it's okay to have a public hearing, and then we can
okay, well,
Table.
let's go.
table the motion, come back to it.
All right, we
To defer.
withdraw the motion.
Pardon?
We withdraw the motion.
Yeah,
We'll
for now.
Sooner or later on. if-
Okay, it seems to be the consensus of the board that they would like to have the motion withdrawn. So we will withdraw the motion and proceed to the public hearing.
Would you like to keep Mr. Lockaby on?
Yes, I think we need to keep you on mic because we've got several other attorneys here and we need to be represented.
Really?
I'm gonna go mute until you ask me something, Mr. Chairman, or one of you other members of the BZA.
So Mike, just so there's no noise, I'm going to put the sound off, but if you want to say anything, please put something in the chat window.
Okay, so we'll move on here to public hearing. Ms. Wagner has proposed a kennel/dog training center pursuant to 170-36E and 170-66A for property located on Route 211 beside Normanna Winery. The parcel is zoned agricultural and is 22 acres in size. The existing barn, 36 by 30, will be rehabilitated and used as an indoor training space for small groups.
No, I think she's withdrawn.
What?
It's been modified.
Right.
I'm reading off of, this was the agenda on BoardDocs, so I'm reading off of, I copied it off today. If it was the incorrect agenda, then I'm reading the wrong agenda, but this was what I copied off the agenda today off the BoardDocs.
I remember, I read it.
And I'm aware of the discrepancies, but this is what was on the agenda. The existing barn, 36 by 30, will be rehabilitated and used as an indoor training space for small group classes and private one-on-one lessons. A 70 by 90 metal building is proposed to be constructed for larger classes. 2 yards will be fenced, one for outdoor agility and another as a dog park. Hours will vary between 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. operating an average of 40 to 50 hours per week, and will be closed on Sundays. No overnight boarding or breeding is proposed. And then there are a variety of attachments to the item. So with that, I will ask the applicant to make whatever presentation they have in mind.
There's no microphone.
The microphone.
No microphone, okay. So hi guys, I'm Charlotte Wagner. I've called Rappahannock home to some degree for the last 30 years. Over the past 18 years, I've made my career being a dog trainer and a dog behaviorist. I started my career assessing rescue dogs and working at a shelter. And then after working at a rescue and I studied abroad, I moved to England. I set up my first training company there. And since then, I've had the privilege of exhibiting at some of the top shows in the country, including Westminster, and I also showed at Crufts in England. I am involved with rescue. We see all dogs, all ages, all sizes, all backgrounds. I successfully completed my Bachelor's of Science with honors from the University of Essex. I specialized in animal management, and I actually double majored. I majored in livestock as well as companion animals. I also have a career diploma as a dog obedience instructor, and I'm also an AKC accredited canine good citizenship evaluator. In 2021, my company, Caninology, earned the Northern Virginia Best Dog Training and Behavior Award, as well as the Warrenton Lifestyle Best Local Dog Trainer. Caninology, my company, has 5-star reviews on Facebook, Yelp, and Google. I have no complaints on record for the last 18 years I've been in business. Training is not just what I do, it's who I am, and I'm excited to have the opportunity to tell you guys a little bit more about my project. Caninology can provide a venue for owners to responsibly train and exercise their dogs. We offer group classes. Our groups are fairly small for up to 5 participants, as well as private one-on-one training lessons. We also do educational workshops, seminars, and events. The reality is the better behaved dogs are, the happier owners are, and the better the community is, because the more dogs are under control, the less conflict you have, especially in public parks and public places. I've been actively looking for a location for our training establishment since 2019, and I have looked at a variety of places. Yes, we did consider Forest Grove at one point, but in addition to that, I did look at the glass blowing factory in Sperryville, which is under commercial use. I did look at the Aileen factory and the property surrounding the Aileen factory. It's not feasible, it's not viable. We looked at multiple different parcels, and either it was too far away from my established clientele or wasn't central, or the topography just was not conducive to the project. The parcel on 211 is ideal based on some of the things that the Planning Commission came up with. So as you know, we tried to do this on Forest Grove Road, and the Planning Commission, I thought, brought up some really valid points. They said that, it was on a side road and the lot was too small and we're removing trees. There were legitimate concerns that, I took to heart. This parcel, I think, addresses some of those concerns. So first of all, it's on a major 4-lane highway with a designated turn lane. So we're not congesting or adding unnecessary traffic on residential streets. It's far from the other neighbors. It's over 900 feet. There's 2 tree lines, so that it does help obscure some of the view. We are in proximity to an existing business. Armada already has traffic, and in a scale, if you look on the Google Maps that's in the document, we're a portion of the size of that enterprise. Prior to the first Planning Commission meeting, I did create a letter with the specifications that are listed in this application in terms of the types of building and the size and the kind of general structure. And I did go door to door to the neighbors and gave them my phone number and email address so that if they had any further concerns, they were welcome to bring them to me. So the property, it's on 22 acres. That's more than 10 times the requirement of what is required for a kennel license in the county. And if you look at the design, I don't know if we can pull that up. If you look at the design, the portion that we're allotting for the dog training center is, less than a quarter of what the actual land mass is. So it's a smaller impact. It's under 5 acres. Now we plan on maintaining the forestry. There's existing vegetation there. We are going to use the extra fields for haymaking, and I am going to be adding livestock to the property. Livestock is also a passion of mine, so sheep and dairy cattle will be used on rotational grazing to help maintain some of the fields. I do believe that since we're keeping the majority of the land in ag use, that ultimately we are consistent with the county's comprehensive plan, and we're doing our best to preserve some of the farmland. So if you look at the design, so we're going to have a horse and goat pasture close to the neighbors so that the neighbors don't have to look at our facility. There's a buffer there with horses and goats. The extra fields will be kept for mowing and haymaking, and then the dog training enterprise with the 2 yards in the buildings is allocated on the Nermata side. Our hours of operation will vary between 10 and 8, primarily because our clients work 9 to 5 jobs, so there is some demand for us to host classes in the evenings. And selectively, we may have events available on the weekends, on Saturdays, but we will be closed on Sundays. In terms of lighting, I did some background research. We will be using dark sky-approved lighting to minimize any light pollution to adjoining lots as well as from 211. And the proposing entrance is directly off 211. There's an existing driveway, which will be basically extending by about 200 feet to come over to the side. And that parking lot has been approved by VDOT. Because it's a designated turn lane on the eastbound side, even people from Rappahannock, you never have to take a U-turn to enter the parcel, which is kind of nice perk to have. In terms of fencing, our fencing will be 2 yards. One is going to be designated for agility and one for off-leash play. This is under the supervision of the owners. We will have 5.5-foot no-climb fencing, which is designed to prevent animals from escaping. And in addition to that, we're also going to have a double-gated entry. Did you guys happen to see the photos that I sent to Michelle? Okay, if not, I have hard copies. Yes, I have hard copies as well. So, oh, you got something. So the buildings, there's a couple of buildings that are already in the county in terms of pole barns that I've shown. You can also see the entrance and exit to the property as well as overview and topography of the actual parcel. But we're basically in that pack, you'll see there's a double gated system that most municipal dog parks use that basically hinders dogs from being able to escape. You must enter the initial area first before you unleash your dog, before you go to the opening area. And for us, the reason we've designed this, we want to make sure that things are safe and secure. We have an obligation and a duty to our clients to make sure that they feel safe, that their dogs are safe, and that the community is safe. The parcel is located right on 211. It is a highway, so I have to do my due diligence to make sure everybody's well taken care of and confined and safe. As for the buildings, the initial, the main training building that we're using is a 70 by 90 pole barn that is going to be insulated to help hinder sound and obviously for heat and cooling and control of temperature. And we specifically chose that style of building because it fits with the county aesthetics. You can see a couple of examples there, but the kind of metal structure pole barn building, they have multiple uses and they're all throughout the county. So if you're driving down 211, especially if you look at the images, for a split second, if you know where to look, you will see the building, but it doesn't create an obtrusive or an eyesore for the public. In terms of size, it's bigger than a car garage, but it's smaller than a horse riding arena. Your average horse riding arena measures about 80 by 200. We will be having all our buildings more than 75 feet from the adjoining lots to make sure that we're in that requirement for kennel buildings. The existing barn, unfortunately, does have some termite damage and some rot, so we're going to be maintaining it and keeping it for hay storage. Instead, we're going to be putting a prefabricated Amish Dutch-style barn building as an office, so that once again it looks like a barn from the outside and isn't obtrusive. But that way we have a place to have our office. All the designs that we've had so far has really been with the neighbors in mind. We wanted to be as far away as possible, so we positioned as far away back as we could. We've made sure that the parking lot and the buildings and the way that they're laid out obstruct view of the play yards for Nermata. That means that Nermata can't hear them as much, but we're also not overstimulating dogs or causing stress or triggering them to become overstimulated. In terms of canine feces, I know people have shown some concern about that, so we decided to actually conduct a study over the course of a week. And in 1 week, we saw 72 dogs. Out of those 72 dogs, we did a survey and we asked every owner. Only 4 dogs out of those 72 defecated before, during, or after class. We think that, it's less than if a dog lived there. So the reality is based on what different municipalities recommended and based on things like on Fairfax government website, on the Prince William website in the city of Alexandria, they say the best thing is pick it up, trash it, take it to landfill. At that point, it's not even enough to consider composting. So what we're going to do is we're going to have doggy waste stations throughout the property where people can pick up their poop and dispose of it. Part of our thing with the AKC and being AKC affiliated was to ensure that we create an environment of responsible dog ownership and that we promote responsible dog ownership, and part of that is picking up after your pet. And furthermore, we have an obligation to our clients to make sure they're welcome and it's safe and clean. There's various other pet businesses in the county. Some have operated very successfully on agricultural property, some with a kennel license. A couple of the businesses, such as Rose Hill Veterinary Clinic and Golden Retreat for Canines, we're already affiliated with and we have an established relationship with. I think that definitely, given these parameters, that we are in line with the comprehensive plan and that we are creating minimal impact based on our design and our plans. Regarding the zoning and the kennel license, as a layman, I did read it as, or any commercial venture. I make my livelihood and my income on training dogs. Dogs were in the ordinance, and it's a commercial venture. So that's how I interpreted that. And I do think that our outline kind of does suit that need. That's it.
Board members, any questions for the applicant?
I missed the part about lighting.
Lighting, yes, sorry.
Would you just?
So we're using
clarify more?
dark sky-proof lighting,
Okay.
so that makes sure that it doesn't shed. Yeah.
Okay, I have one question, because I think it's central to the issue, is that how much barking actually takes place during your dog training?
None. Rare occasion, if a dog barks, we must address it because that's my job description. For us, and I did forward a video, and I believe that Michelle has a video accessible if you wanted to show it, of some of our group classes. Part of my job is to make sure that dogs are quiet and well-behaved. And I personally hate barking, it drives me off the wall. So for us, in terms of noise impact, our classes are small, so we have good control. Our ratio of professional to owner to dog is there, because we're not managing 20 dogs going crazy at the dog park with 3 people. So in terms of noise and barking, it is almost non-existent.
And also, another question, other than water, do you provide any nourishment to the dogs when they're in training?
Well, treats, they get treats where they're trained.
That's part of the training.
Yes, they get training. Part of the training process is they get treats. They get treats, we provide water, play opportunities for them.
Is there any time during this training when the dogs are out of are not under the control of their owners?
We have in the past accepted dogs from clients who don't have time to dedicate themselves, where we do what's called drop-off training. Now, we didn't have a facility at the time, but I pick up your dog, I work with it at Home Depot because you don't have time, or I take it to the park and I work with it, and then I return the dog to you. And that is within the period of an hour or 2. It's not a quote-unquote boarding situation, but we have in the past had a transfer where we have worked the dog without the presence of the owner. And yes, that may be an option at the facility if they say, I want to drop the dog off for an hour and do agility. Sure.
But that's not like daycare or something.
No, we do not do daycare.
Do you have problems with dogs escaping your facility?
In 18
During
years, I
training.
haven't lost a single one. I'm very proud of that.
And whose responsibility is that?
So
For
we have
keeping
a
the
waiver.
dogs?
We have a liability waiver that basically says that the owners are responsible for their dogs. But in addition to that, we also have liability insurance, so both, depending on the circumstance. We've never had to deal with that, so.
If a dog comes into your training facility, do you consider yourself the primary custodian or the person in charge of the dog?
Not if the owner is with the dog. But if the owner is not with the dog and they were to do a drop-off scenario, that would be a different discussion. Because at that point, so if you're saying if a dog gets loose on the property and I'm with them on the property and the owner's there, I would hold them responsible. If I'm working a dog and it gets loose on the property and the owner isn't there, like a drop-off scenario, then it would be my liability.
In the drop-off situation, is that for a class situation, or is that normally on a one-on-one?
That's on a one-on-one basis.
Okay, so it'd be just a single dog.
Just a single dog, yes. And it's primarily for owners who don't have time or they want to give their dog some extra support. It's supplemental at that point.
I have a question, maybe the lawyers will be the best ones to address this is, we're talking about agricultural versus commercial. And it strikes me that the fact that we're dealing with dogs, is there some reason that we don't consider dogs livestock from an
The USDA
agricultural
does.
point of view?
The USDA
And
does.
secondly, can anyone name a farm that doesn't have a dog?
Well, what's the difference between a dog training facility and a horse training facility? Horses we don't eat. So we bring them somewhere and they're trained. And they come back, right? And that is somehow under an agricultural.
Right, I mean, if you're training horses the same way as you train dogs, and horses are considered livestock and therefore it's an agricultural application, and I don't see why isn't the same thing goes for dogs.
It's a good question.
I think their kennel definition specifically calls out dogs. And-
I understand that.
And so I think that's the definition that we have to deal with.
All right.
And I will, because I've had this thought also, and I will add into this discussion, is if an equestrian facility, because for whatever reason decides that on one day a week or whatever, they want to do dog training, would they then be required to have a kennel permit?
Of course.
In that a equestrian facility would lend itself to dog training.
I can tell you that we've successfully rented equestrian facilities for agility in Fauquier County. Because right now we're traveling from place to place.
In Fauquier
in order
County,
to do
did
our
that?
classes.
Were you required to have a permit
Were
then?
those special events?
They were not, it was more complicated in Fauquier County. They put us under a trade school.
A what?
A trade school.
And yes,
But that was
exactly,
before the change of the ordinances.
exactly what permitting were you required to have in Fauquier?
I was under a trade school because we were in a commercial setting, but it was Old Town.
Okay.
We don't want to
And that was a
ourselves
special.
after Fauquier anyway, right?
Okay, any more questions for the applicant? Okay, then we will open up the public hearing to public comment. And for the sake of time or whatever, we've received a lot of emails from a number of you or whatever. And so if you send us an email, I think we, unless the board doesn't agree, we've had your input. So if there are people here who have not sent us emails, I would ask them to raise their hands first and make their comments.
I have not sent an email. Donna McConnell, owner of Golden Retreat for Canines. So I do have a dog boarding facility in the county, in an agricultural zone, on my property. I've been in business now for 12 years, have not had any issues. I was originally given my special permit with a, kind of a year probation, so to speak, just to make sure that all of my neighbors didn't have a problem with the facility. I built a facility that was pretty much soundproof. I don't keep the dogs outside all the time. So in respect to like a training facility, kind of the same thing. They are not, my neighbors' dogs are out all the time and can hear them barking in the night. And this is typical of our county. We do have a lot of, like we say, farm dogs out here that live outside. We have livestock guardian dogs that live outside. So in terms of the difference, again, you're really not comparing apples to apples with that. My facility is more comparing apples to apples with a training facility where they're in the building most of the time. Sure, I let them out like 5 times a day to play some, to go potty. When I do have too much noise, I am there so I can control it just like Charlotte would. And again, I went through that year of probation. I had no complaints with any of the neighbors, and I made sure of this. I think, again, the training facility is going to be on the same wave, but again, she's done less hours than I am. So as far as setup, I mean, I have dogs out at 10 o'clock at night. I have dogs out at 6 in the morning. I started off with even later hours than she's doing as far as drop-offs and pickups, traffic coming on the property. Of course, that's come down as the business has increased. I can house up to 42 dogs in my facility, according to my county permit. And again, it's just, I think she's going to be a really good presence in the county for the facility, for a good dog trainer around here that we will work with. And again, like she said, she's there to work with the dogs and the people. And I don't think it's going to have any impact on the neighbors. Again, going back to my facility has not had any impact on neighbors. And I have more dogs on the property than she does. At one time.
How much property do you have?
10 acres. I have, and I can see my neighbors' houses on each side. Not in the back of the facility. I do have a buffer of trees. But, I realize that, again, in this county, there is a lot of different kind of noises. We have gunshots. We've had her neighboring property, or to-be neighboring property, shooting off cannons that I could hear on my property, which is, I don't know how many miles away, maybe 3 miles away. So I don't think noise is an issue here. I don't think the traffic's an issue because, like she stated, she's only going to have small classes. They're not going to be a lot of people on the property at one time. I would love to have her as a neighboring facility in our county for this business. I think it's a great use of the property, and it is, like she said, on 211. Mine's not even, mine's on a secondary road. So she's on a primary road, which in a lot of places could be turned into commercial property anyway. I mean, you've got, like she said, a winery right next door. I know
It's zoned agricultural.
I realize that. But, look 20 years down the road, we don't know what's going to happen in this county. Yeah, we want to keep it agricultural, but we can't, we have no idea what will happen down in the future with the properties that are on that road. But I am in full support, obviously, of Charlotte Wagner opening a facility in our county.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else like to speak? Yeah, please come back.
Hello, my name is Jeremy Levy. I'm the winery manager at Normandy Winery. I'm here representing Dr. Sudha Patil and Normandy Winery. Normandy Winery is very concerned with the plan for the new facility next door. Normandy Winery employs 4 full-time employees yearly, 2 to 3 additional.
Excuse me, sir, could you take your mask off?
Absolutely.
Just like pretend we're eating or something.
Do you want me to start from the top or just where?
No, what I heard is just like a real style.
Normandy Winery employs 4 full-time employees yearly, 2 to 3 additional employees. 2 to 3 additional full-time employees and up to a dozen part-time employees seasonally. So that's April through November. This year alone, we have processed 53 tons of taxable produce, all of which coming from the Commonwealth of Virginia, with the vast majority of them coming here in Rappahannock County, in our own state. Normandy Winery produces about 2,000 cases of wine, which is 24,000 bottles plus of taxable product a year. The tasting room makes sure that all the products, all of which taxable, can be sold. Along with bottles, we also sell glasses of wine. A lone glass of wine is taxed differently than a glass of wine sold with, let's say, our butter chicken. Rappahannock County has a specific tax for glasses of wine and food items purchased together. This also does not include the taxes and county expenses Dr. Patil pays just to have agricultural land here in Rappahannock County. There are several reasons for concern that have been discussed at length at this meeting and the prior about property value, noise pollution, environmental impact, etc. I'm here on Norman's behalf to express concern on any impact that could negatively affect the winery. Dr. Patil and Norman Winery are concerned on the impact of the proposed facility on our ability to maintain our crops, produce nationally acclaimed products, and continue to operate and grow as a farm winery. The proposal states, put up today, and I quote, "Our operations shall have no adverse effect on air, surface, ground, or water quality for the existing and adjacent lots. There will be no dumping or use of restricted chemicals or products as part of our operations," end quote. In the proposal submitted is a compost system to dispose of 2 30-gallon bags of waste a week. This system was submitted with a USDA guideline for the composting procedures. In said document, on page 9, it states, and I quote, "Decrease health risks by not applying dog waste compost to crops intended for human consumption," end quote. If this were a residential use with a few dogs on site, Norman believes this to be sufficient. But with 60 gallons of waste a week, translated to 1,500 gallons of waste a year. 1,500 gallons translates to 5,678.115 liters of waste. And I actually have a document, give me 1 second. I present this to the board. I have with me a picture of me standing next to our 2,950 liter stainless steel tanks for scale. The waste per year would fill up one of those tanks fully and another couple inches from the top. A 1-week study is insufficient for the amount of dog waste that would be present throughout the year and contradictory to the submitted documents earlier. In the updated proposed layout of the property, if we can go to that, the screen that had all the locations next to Normandy. Thank you. In the updated proposed layout of the property, sites C, D, and E, the training facility, dog park, and agility yard, are all located uphill of our vineyard, where Vidal Blanc, Chamberson, and Chardonnay blocks are planted, and where we process 100% of our produce. Also nearby are Cap Franc, Merlot, and Cap Sauv blocks. A natural spring runs behind the proposed location, Ms. Davidson's property, and empties into a pond. This pond is located near Ravine, Petit Verdot, and Dr. Patil's personal well system. In the event of substantial rainfall, let's say 2018, maybe half of that rainfall, especially around the pre-harvest and harvest months in July and October, we have grave concerns on the impact of runoff affecting our produce. Going off of 2021 numbers alone, this could possibly jeopardize 28.7 tons of taxable produce grown and processed directly downhill the proposed facility. Not only that, but it would jeopardize 8.47 tons of produce we sell to other vineyards, impacting their ability to grow their wines and produce their product. Principle 7, Policy 3 of the Rappahannock County Comprehensive Plan states, and I quote, "Promote only economic growth that assists in maintaining our existing balance and is compatible with the environmental quality and rural character, and does not adversely affect active farm operations, forestry operations, residential neighborhoods, the tourist industry, and the county's fiscal stability. Any impact, both positive and negative, has an immediate and far-reaching impact on the taxable revenue, ability for Norman to staff and pay competitive wages, and provide a tourist destination for Rappahannock County. This proposal puts Dr. Suda Patil and Norman Winery's livelihood at stake." Which brings me to my final point. I was trying to stay as objective as possible and remove my emotions from this meeting. I'd like permission from the board to address you not as a representative of Norman Winery, but as a representative of myself, Jeremy Levy, someone that works within the county.
Can I ask you how many tons of herbicide and pesticide you use on your grapes every year?
I do not have that information.
How about fungicides?
I do not have that
And do
information.
you also know that you could have, by right, there could be a pigsty or a flock of chickens, 1,000 or more?
I do know that the herbicides, pesticides, and fungicides that we use are very well regulated, and they are safe for human consumption.
And let me ask you, how do you, I understand the topography is that they're uphill, but given the nature of the operation, how do you see that this pollution is occurring?
It would be runoff. So if it rains, rain.
Rain, but what is rain washing down? They're cleaning up after themselves all the time.
The projected, what she proposed was a compost system. And that was in the documentation that was uploaded. It came with USDA, it was supposed to be a natural compost. And that's what we have grave concerns of, is this.
So you would be satisfied if there was just no composting, really?
I wouldn't say we'd be satisfied, just because the flooring, the flooring wouldn't, how do you clean that?
How do you clean what?
The flooring, is it like a concrete, is it anything that can get into the water?
So how about if she moved the composting area away from, I realize you're downhill from her.
Mhm.
I have looked at it from your parking lot.
Yes.
And I can understand why you're not crazy about it.
Yes. The spring also is an issue. There's a spring and there's a slope going towards the spring. So either way, pretty much anywhere that isn't directly in front of 211, which I don't think is the best place for a compost system, would either go into the spring system or go directly into our crops below the tasting room.
Well, they have to have the horse and goat
And
area
cows.
seems to be remote enough that that would be appropriate.
We're worried about the dog fecal matter. Horses.
No, that's how I'm
You're not
saying.
worried
You see, if
about
they put that, if they kept the composting process in at the opposite end of the property, would that be satisfactory?
I would have to.
Wait a minute. I'm sorry, we're not taking any.
I-
the audience.
I would have to look at the topography, and I wouldn't know. I just know that where the stated compost would be was a concern.
Right.
So I cannot, confirm or say that we'd be satisfied. I'd have to look at the slope. Because we do have, right next, you can actually see it on the map, is closer towards 211. We also have Tanat Petit Verdot there. So even Tanat and Petit Verdot varietals, we have growing close to 211. So even if it was moved forward, that would impact those. So instead of impacting our Vidal Blanc, Chambersons, and Chardonnays, it would be impacting other grapes.
So I'm not talking about moving forward, I'm talking about moving to the left.
The left as
See
it,
where it says horse and
yes.
goats? If they're
Then it gets into the spring. The spring goes all the way up.
Yeah, I've got a question. Is Narmada a dog-friendly winery?
Mhm.
How many dogs, do you limit the number of dogs that people bring in, and if it goes over 6 or something like that, you say, I'm sorry, you can't bring your dog in?
We limit, so no dogs allowed in the tasting room. We limit dogs on the balcony to 20 pounds or less. And then all dogs that are on the property need to be leashed and under direct adult supervision.
Do you limit the number?
No.
Thank you.
Can I address the board as a non-representative Normal Winery?
Okay.
What further do you have to add?
So I live right next door in Warren County. My only connection to Rappahannock County is that I work here and I'm getting married here. My fiance and I just moved to Winchester and bought a beautiful house in Front Royal for the sole purpose of being closer to Normal Winery. Both myself and my fiance are employed by Normal Winery. 100% of my family's income comes directly from Normal Winery. When the winery prospers, my family prospers. When the winery was hit with COVID and its variances, my family felt it. My livelihood and the livelihood of all those that work for Norma are tied directly to the livelihood of Dr. Subotil and Norma Winery. Anything short of a 100% guarantee that Norma Winery's ability as an active farm and tourist destination can operate without hindrance in any way by this facility is unacceptable. A vote in favor of this proposal without thoroughly addressing these concerns is to disregard Rappahannock County's own comprehensive plan. That's all.
Thank you. Anyone else care to speak?
My name's Terry Basham. I live in Amosville, Virginia. I was the president of a dog training club back in the late 70s. And we had about 15 to 20 dogs per class. And we never really had a problem. We break the classes up. We had 4 or 5 people training. It was never a problem. And I got away from dog training and got a new dog. I think I can speak for most dog owners. You want your dogs to have good manners. Acceptable. And there's things that are not acceptable. That's why we take the dog training. Not only in dog training do you train the dog, but Mrs. Harvey over there trains the trainer. And I had felt like I missed some stuff, so I took a class in Manassas, and it was okay. And my dog passed. I didn't like it, but he passed. I got to thinking there was a class closer, and I went. I called up, hey, yeah, my dog's had training. That day, I didn't get in. You have to come and take my class. You take a beginner's class. And she will judge if you're able to continue. And there's dogs, I know, she probably can tell you, your dog's not ready yet. Come back when it is. You've got another option. If you would like, I'll come to you, but you're not coming into this class to be disruptive. I didn't like it, but I went, and we did fine. And we went on and on. We went several places. And you were asked a question about being off leash. You don't get off leash until you've advanced through these classes. My dog's in agility. Well, I don't take him around with a leash. Up, over, tunnel, the dog responds. That's off leash. And you were asking about farm animals. Just a question I'm going to throw out here. Sheep, dogs. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say. I tell you, I'm sitting here. I can't believe this thing about dog feces. She recommends before you come to class, do not feed your dog. I'm just going to throw out time. Before 1 o'clock, after 1 o'clock, you got a 4 o'clock class, just the numbers. Make him empty, that's the term I use, empty before you come to class. It's not an issue. Based on what I just heard, every dog from Rappahannock County and all the aligning counties are going to be coming to her facility. Wow, that doesn't happen. Responsible dog owners pick up their dog's feces and do away with it. She's got large containers. They will be emptied daily, I'm sure. But I'm sorry. Being a dog owner, I take it kind of personal. But we're here to train our dog, have good behavior, acceptable behavior. It's no more than a kid, But she does not accept dogs that are unruly. Okay, no control. The trainer has to have control. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak?
I do. I sent an email, but I got a voice.
Okay,
And it needs to be heard. My name is Jeff Nicodemus. I'm from Amosville. I live on Cabin Lane. Am I allowed to ask you guys a question? Because the question I have is, nobody in God's green earth has ever denied what this lady knows. Nobody has ever denied that she can't train a dog. Ma'am, dogs bark. That's why they come to you. And if they're that trained, then they don't need to come to you. The matter that is at hand right now is you guys are looking at a commercial property on an agricultural piece of land. In October, on a smaller piece, they said the property's too small, 11 acres. It bordered Chris Parrish's property. She doesn't own this property. This lady owned her property. If she owned her property and she wanted to start a business, I'd probably support her. She's already here. She doesn't own the land. It's pending this application. Us residents on Cabin Lane, we do not even have district jurisdiction or anybody to talk to because Rich Kohler is a listing agent. So my question to you is, if it was unanimously approved last month and unanimously denied in October, what is the difference now?
We didn't have anything to do with it.
I know you didn't. You did, Ms. Ritter.
Oh, I was on the planning commission.
You were on the planning commission. So why was it such an issue then? Because Chris Parrish came to the meeting and stood? Because Chris Parrish is gonna get $450,000 out of this deal?
Okay, let's not be confused.
So that's my question. It shouldn't, you're right, it shouldn't be this far. You shouldn't have to have an attorney on the microphone. You shouldn't have to have one there. You shouldn't have to have one there. It's protecting our agricultural property in Rappahannock County.
As I understood, and I was not there, I was not part of that decision, but as I understood, there were basically two objections to the prior property. One was the road, okay, that was valid. The other was that all the neighbors objected.
The neighbors, there were two that spoke that I saw in the video. They were concerned about the view noise, which is recorded in minutes, because Chris was worried they were going to clear too many trees. And it was a piece of property too small, in which was also brought up that she should be living on the property, that we're going to have, he was concerned about a business that didn't have any. That is very true, ma'am.
It's not the issue before us.
It is the issue. It wasn't good 7 miles down the road on a smaller piece of property, but it's okay here. There's no commercial property. Miss Abdullah's got Legacy Farm. It's got a field, it's got septic, it's got water, it's got lights, it's got a commercial building on it, and it's only $75,000 more than what she's buying Parrish's. That's a commercial property for you. That's a commercial property.
Now, let me ask you, do you think that dogs are not agricultural animals?
No, I don't think dogs are agricultural. Cows, yeah, I can raise cows, I can slaughter them, I can sell meat, provide taxes, provide jobs, feed
You
families.
can hurt them with a dog, too.
You can hurt them with a four-wheeler. You can do anything, but a dog is not livestock. A dog is for companionship. A cow is not for companionship. Excuse me?
I said, I maintain the dog is livestock, and that's just a matter of opinion, I think.
And I agree with your right to disagree with me.
So our 3 dogs don't make us agricultural.
Really are. Yeah, but no.
Okay, we, in regards
What are
to
the
your-
special events? What are the special events that you referenced
No,
on Saturday?
No,
we're not
no.
talking about special events. This is not part of the,
If
she's
you want to
not
address us.
asking for special events, so we are not talking
She
about
did,
that.
she just said it. Less than 20, she literally said special events on Saturday.
Did I hear that?
I did say, we do pack walks in Old Town Warrenton, where we go and we walk
In
15
Warrenton.
dogs on the Greenway.
Okay,
It's
you
our-
do it,
We
that
do
is-
pack walks, we do seminars on how to get your dog ready for your newborn child that is born. We do dog bite prevention and the Be a Tree program through Doggone Safe on how to prevent your kid from getting bit by a dog. We do recall workshops where we practice only recalling your dog so they have a good recall. We do loose leash walking workshops where we work on leash manners and skills. We do canine good citizenship and trick dog testing. We do fake dog shows for people who want to get to dog shows to get them used to how to handle their dog and how to stack and gait their dog. We offer these randomly throughout the year based on
Okay,
demand.
those are special classes, basically,
Again,
but they're not special, you're not doing like dog events where there's competitions going on or
No.
anything. No, so it wouldn't be drawing a spectator crowd.
It's an
or
event
anything.
for our clients,
It's-
yes,
an
but
event
it's
for
not,
your
yeah.
clients.
Again, the event is irrelevant. I'm asking you guys who have lived here forever. When I ride down the road from Clevenger's Corner to Thornton Gap, that view ain't changed much in 35 years. You talk about Falk here, well, guess what? Warrington's got a Moe's, a friggin' gym.
We
This is
don't
where it
care about
starts.
talk here.
I understand, but this is where it starts.
Rappahannock.
And this is where it starts, setting
Let
up
me
precedents.
ask, because you keep asking on this, the commercial issue. There are degrees of commercial operation. Would you agree that the commercial operation that she is proposing is greater or lesser than her neighbor, the winery?
Oh,
The
it's gonna,
winery is something that we don't have any jurisdiction over. That has
I'm not saying we have the
been
first
laid
name.
down by Richmond. It's defined as an agricultural activity, and to bring up Narmada is a red herring.
it's not even
In my
close.
opinion.
If I answer your question, I look at it in terms of a successful business. You're banking on 774 people building houses in Clevenger's Corner. Let me finish mine.
We have.
I actually have business.
We're off the issue. Levender's Corner has nothing to do with what we're talking about.
It does, because those are the people that
We're
are
off
out
the
here.
issue. We're not discussing it. Does anybody else have any comments pertaining to the permit?
Yes. Hi, I'm Dabney Kirchman. I did not send you Dabney Kirchman. I didn't send you all, this board, an email this time. I believe my husband did. I'm just going to, speaking in support of this proposal. We've been working with Charlotte since 2017 when we adopted a rescue dog who had some serious behavior problems. Because of her work with us, we were able to get him to the vet. He couldn't be taken to the vet. We were able to keep the dog. He only lived with us for 4 years, and then he passed away sadly. But it's not, on the one hand, I can stand before you and say it's not about individual stories of success, but it is. There are many more of us than you see here who have dogs who we're able to live with and have around our family and take to the vet and be part of the community. And without her services, that dog would have been put down years before the end of his natural life. And, I've lived in urban areas. I've lived in Montgomery County, and I've taken multiple dogs to multiple different trainers. Her work with our dogs is better than any of them. We are so fortunate that we have someone as talented and persistent as this young woman who is trying to open a business here and do something good that we will all benefit from. Again, I took that dog to the vet. I kept that dog with my family. I thought I have a portrait that a Rappahannock student who's now an artist made of him. And he was able to be part of our family because of Charlotte's work and her persistence. So please support this. Thank you very much.
My name is Lynn Pittinger. I live on Weaver Road next to Roll. We've lived there for 20 years. We've never had an issue with Roll, dog barking, or fecal matter. My wife and I have taken 3 courses from caninology, and the result of that is that we're much better off now trying to correct the behavior of a rescue dog that we adopted in last July. They've done an excellent job of helping us understand how to train dogs. Our house is 2,000 feet away from Roll, and we've never had a parking problem. Thank you.
I'll go ahead and, Gary Curry, County Administrator, speaking on behalf of myself, Zoning Administrator. Just to place into the record, the county staff believes the definition of kennel as it is presented in Rappahannock County Code 170-8 does in fact include, is appropriate for this use in our perspective, as I discussed earlier, but I'll repeat it now. Without the extra language, kennel, any place so designated that dogs cannot escape, and where any number of animals are kept for the purpose of any commercial purpose or economic venture, we believe that's appropriate. Take no stance on whether this is an appropriate use for this site based on the impacts it might have to the community. That's up for you to decide.
Do you hear any other comments?
Mr. Brown, are you going to,
Excuse me?
I was going to ask you, Mr. Counsel for the applicant was going to address.
Mr. Chairman, what would you prefer council's remarks during the public hearing or after it's concluded?
I consider council as part of, you're on that side of the fence, so you can make your presentations.
Either I'll go or Judge Ashwell.
Well, Mr. Atkins apparently works with the time, so let him go first and then we'll.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I'm Jack Atkins from Jackson District, and we got to stop allowing these commercial uses in agricultural districts. We have people on South Cove Road now, they've come and built $1 million home, and we got a gun, a training, or whatever, shooting range in their back door And they gotta put up with that. Next door to me, I have a junkyard. They've been trying to get rid of for 4 years. You got beep, 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 beep. And all that's going all over there. I can see it when I come out the house. And you can hear it any time of the night. The county appraised my property. He raised my house $100,000. And across the road, he lowered that property. I said, what's going on here? You lower that property. He said, it don't look good over there. But my question was him. What's that do to my property? No answer. And we ran another commercial entity to be put down here where these people are well established, they've lived there. Narromile Winery is there. If you there drinking a glass of wine, eating cheese and crackers, you want to hear whoop, 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 the first thing you know, a whistle blows. It's time for it to stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
That's all. I'll be quick. My name's Jason Fleet. Saw a letter I wrote probably, so I'm not going to go over a lot of that detail. The one thing I kind of regret I didn't put in that letter was a recognition that, and we've kind of heard that with a lot of passion tonight from the other side, about the qualifications and the dedications of Ms. Wagner to what she does and being very good at what she does. And I don't think anybody at all disputes that. What you're hearing as a common refrain is that these are people's homes, and this is an agricultural district. As you know, I've only lived here 4 months. So I literally arrived and I had this hat trick, and now suddenly I have a commercial entity trying to go in, and that affects property values. And anybody who's a realtor or has worked with realtors know that if you say, well, there's a kennel nearby, that's a little bit different than perhaps a winery. And I would actually use a different 4-letter word than kept. I would say care. So there's talk there about sort of misogynistic so that it looks good with the application. There's going to be livestock and horses and things of that nature. But nobody's going to be there. So where's the care, per se, for the animals that would be on that property and things like that? So some of that doesn't make sense to me. By Ms. Wagner's own photos, you saw that this is an elevated area where she's going to have this, and then you're going to have commercial parking. You're going to have these street lamps that are up high, and they may be dark skies, but you're going to have essentially elevated lighting that in the winter, I know I can see the glow of Warrington from my house. And I'm pretty sure that this commercial spread of the parking lot is something that you would probably notice if you were a neighbor one here. So, excuse me, I'm talking, this isn't funny. The other thing I wanted to mention is I have not seen any marketing materials. You know, one of the concerns I have is really that, you know, what happens in the future? As the gentleman kind of put that, you know, once the property is kind of gone a certain direction, it doesn't go the other direction. So as stewards of Rappahannock and, you know, and making sure we have this rural setting where we all want to live, you know, it's pretty difficult to put things back the other way. I talked about policing of the area to make sure that there was compliance with everything. With 22 acres, it's a pretty big area that it could expand to. But again, I haven't seen anything here as far as marketing on the success of it. If she fails, you know, we would anticipate a COVID. If she fails and she has to suddenly vacate, now we have a commercial property, we have large steel buildings, we have all kinds of things that we're going to have essentially, you know, now somebody's got to come in and we'll sell that property, and the precedent has been set. And I won't go into
permit terminates.
Sorry, go ahead.
The permit terminates with her.
Right, but my point is that you've set a precedent, though, by granting the exception, I
The
think.
permit goes with the person, not the property. What she's proposing to put up is a pole barn. That's an agricultural building. So if somebody moves in, yes, they may raise cattle, whatever, they're getting a nice barn, but as far as a commercial intrusion, it's no different than all the other pole barns we have in the county.
Most of them are storing hay.
Sure, yeah, I understand that, and that was the point that was made of a similar thing, but essentially what we're adding, though, is, you know, an exception and some precedent for that exception, if there was some other type of business that wanted to use it for other than storing hay.
No, that wouldn't be the case. She's getting a permit for exactly what she says she's going to do. If she cannot sell it, if she sells the property, the permit is no longer valid. And yes, the buildings will remain, but like I just said, they're agricultural buildings on agricultural property.
Okay, well, I'm not the expert on this, okay, but what I do know is that typically you don't have parking lots and lighting and things like that are typically that are put in to support a public stance for an area for the public to come. And this is an agricultural area where people have properties. All of the properties around this location, as far as I know, there's a single, I could be wrong, a single property around this area that is in favor of this. So she's essentially trying to shoehorn essentially a business into a place where everybody around it opposes it. So it seems like that would be something that would, I think would be a little discouraging to me as far as knowing that, that's going to probably be the case that you don't have a good relationship with the neighbors there. But also, if things did escalate in the future, then, it would be something where, you may have people who vote with their feet and move elsewhere and that sort of thing. So, anyway, so those are the only points I made. You already saw my letter. If I wasn't aware that the permit would end with that, but it seems to me that there would be some precedent there for somebody else to come back in the future.
Thank you. And I will re-mention what was mentioned earlier, that I think the neighbors around this property have to be aware of, is that there are by right uses for that property where you have no say whatsoever, and the one that nobody wants to live next door to is a pig farm. And
there's
moving into this property, you're not going to have a pig farm there. And but it is a permitted use. And that's what you have to be aware of.
There's a fire station either, but nobody's
What?
that. What on earth is a pig farm got to do with this?
It's a by right use. They don't even have to ask anybody's permission.
How many agricultural buildings in the county do you know that has water and sewer in it, that you say is agricultural? Can you repeat that? How many agricultural buildings in Rappahannock County do you know of, as a pole building, have water and sewer in it?
I don't believe this building is going to have water and sewer in it.
It will have to have.
It has to have a working bathroom somewhere on the site.
And I know a lot of them.
And yes, there.
Water, you bet.
Mr. Fraser.
I'm in an awkward position here, Mr. Chairman, members of the BZA. Being a member of the Board of Supervisors, we have entrusted this body with certain legislative acts to approve or disapprove, to weigh the permit application for special use permits. And as one of my constituents here pointed out, their planning commission member recused himself because at least the appearance of conflict of interest. So they had nobody in their neighborhood speaking up for them. And so that kind of puts me in a particular difficulty, because as a member of the Board of Supervisors, the zoning ordinance that you're dealing with was actually adopted before I got on the board, but has been re-adopted and amended sometimes with me on the board. That has stayed the same. The legislative intent for the BZA to work on certain permits in the community has been delegated to this board by the Board of Supervisors that I sit on. So I'm not here to say whether or not this use fits in this community, because that's your job tonight. But I am really bothered about procedures here. First off, this whole debacle about debating the definition of the word kennel prior to an application that's before you tonight. I've never seen anything quite like that, but
We've never had an application like this, Mr.
Well, no, I've seen kennel applications. My neighbor's got one. And
not a kennel application that didn't want to be a kennel. That is.
But see, there you go again. You're now arguing with me me over the definition of kennel, and that's this person's job. She's the zoning administrator, as was pointed out by Mr. Brown earlier. So, and then that was pointed out to you about a week ago, and I've got the email here to prove it, that you've been sending emails back and forth to Mr. Curry and Ms. Summers, and they pointed that out to you about a week ago. And then I've got another problem about procedure here tonight. Did y'all vote to authorize the chairman to hire legal counsel for this purpose prior to him doing that?
No.
No, see?
Mr. Frazier.
Mr.
Frazier.
I'm talking.
Mr. Frazier.
I'm talking.
Mr.
I asked
Frazier.
a question, sir.
Did
you have authorization to hire an attorney? What?
Give him a chance to
I'm
answer.
the chairman in this room. Please sit down.
The chairman doesn't have the ability to hire a legal counsel without
Frazier,
this.
please sit down.
I'm not sitting down because I'm not done, sir. You gave 20 minutes to the applicant. You've got to give 20 minutes to each and every one that wants to speak about this subject tonight. You can't sit me down, sir. I'm asking you about procedure, and you have violated it several times, and you're trying to do it now. And what you're going to do, you're setting up a situation where everybody's going to have the ability to appeal this tonight. Because no matter which way it goes, y'all are really messed up.
Mr. Frazier, this is a personal matter between you and me.
No, it's not a personal matter. I'm
It
on the board of
certainly
supervisors.
is.
You're the
And I'm asking you to
BCA.
sit down. I'm the chairman here. You're not in charge right now.
I'm
You're
not.
just
I
part-
never said I was in charge.
Sit down.
I never said I was in charge.
Sit down.
I'm
You
not
are
ready to
not
sit down,
in
sir.
charge. You are out of order. And I'm asking you to sit
I'm out of
down.
order. I'm out of order for telling the BZA that they've been out of order all night long. That's
You
what I'm
are
out of
out
order
of order. Please sit down.
I'm going to sit down, but I want that on the record. I want that in the minutes that this person got up and instructed the BZA that they have been out of order all night long.
In what way?
I just told you. Now you're telling me to sit down.
Mr. Frazier, sit down.
I'm going to
You're
sit down, but I
disrupting
want
the
that in the minutes. That's going to be in the minutes, right?
Sit down.
Yeah, you can't help it. It's
I asked a
your-
question. I asked a simple
down.
question. I asked you a question. You're going to put my comments in the minutes.
What's
Yes, sir.
That's not what minutes do. It's not the point of minutes. It's not, minutes do not record casual conversations.
It's not casual.
Or, of course it's not, or individual comments.
That's an official review, sir. It's not a casual
That's not
concept.
how minutes work.
Mr. Frazier, there is a circuit court, and you can file any charges you wish against this board in circuit court. You can appeal anything you do. That is your right. But for now, you're out of order, and I'm no longer recognizing.
I sat down, sir. What else do you
I
want to
said,
do?
I'm not
You're going to
going to
continue to
recognize you.
reprimand me after you tell me to sit down? You don't even
anybody else
have
wish
any
to
idea
speak?
what you're doing up there.
Does anybody else wish to speak?
My name is Chris Bird. I live in Hampton District, and I feel that things have gotten very confused and exaggerated here, and I would like to think that we should go back to the basics of this application and understand that as an agricultural property with a special use permit, a kennel is allowed. And whether or not this application involves all of the uses of a kennel isn't important. The fact that it has one is quite enough. And I think it's important to understand that land ownership is thought of as a bundle of rights and privileges to the land. This does not give people rights and privileges on land they don't own. And as far as I have seen this evening, there is no documented, reasonable, and known use by this application that would in any way negatively impact the neighbors. They are acting out of unreasonable fears, and they are denying or seeking to deny the use of the property to its putative owner. This is something that I don't feel should stand.
Thank you. Any more comments? Seeing none, I'm closing the public comment, and we will go to the attorneys. I almost forgot about, sorry. Who wants to go first?
I'm fine, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for indulging me for just a minute. I'll make my comments brief. It's been a long evening. Primarily, I rise to respond to the written memorandum that Judge Axwell filed on behalf of one of the landowners, which, of course, was a persuasive document. But I wanted to call out a few things to the board members' attention. We've already vetted at length this question of whether this application falls within the definition of a kennel or not. That's something that's also addressed in the memorandum. I won't rehash all of that. It did, although it did call into question also this question about whether there were pins involved, that was somehow a requirement of the definition in the code, which are defined as pins designed and maintained for secure confinement. Again, your application materials and Ms. Wagner's explanation and presentation earlier makes clear that any dogs coming to the property are going to be confined. They're either going to be confined in that building if training is going on in there, or they're going to be confined within that fenced area. So there won't be any animals that are just running free on the property. They will be pinned in some way. Not necessarily in pins like we think of at the Humane Society or the SPCA. The memorandum does go at some length also to discuss the ways that the proposed use is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. I would submit to this board that the best arbiters of whether the use is consistent with the comprehensive plan in connection with the application before you tonight is the Planning Commission itself. That body considered this application in detail last month. Ms. Ritter was there, of course, as the BZA's representative and can attest to that. And while the member specifically from this magisterial district did think it appropriate to recuse himself from that discussion, there was a lively discussion and a lot of debate back and forth amongst all the Planning Commission members, and I would submit that it was a well and thorough airing of all of the issues regarding this application insofar as whether it was consistent or inconsistent with the comprehensive plan. It's also worth noting that while we like to, when it suits us, and I do the same myself, obviously as an attorney we like to trot out the goals or the principles that are enumerated in the comprehensive plan. And again, it's worth remembering that, again, as the Albemarle Handbook, I think in a very well thought out manner explains this, the comprehensive plan is just a set of guidelines. And ultimately what this board is called upon to apply and make your legislative decision based on is not the comp plan, but rather the zoning ordinance, which is what governs the decision. The comp plan, as you all understand, merely informs the discussion and it informs the Board of Supervisors' decision making in whether they want to enact changes to the zoning ordinance. But ultimately, it's the zoning ordinance that applies. And it's worth pointing out that the zoning ordinance, our zoning ordinance, has for years provided that this use is a permissible use, permissible compatible use in the agricultural zoning district upon the issuance of a special use permit by this board. Finally, the memorandum, just to touch on this briefly, suggests that the application is incomplete and that it does not contain something styled an explicit statement of justification. However, what our zoning ordinance actually provides for in section 17057A is an explicit statement of proposed use. And it goes on to say it may be on the application form. The application materials clearly, I think, include an explicit statement of the proposed use. as well as all the as well as the zoning administrator's current application forms, which have been completed in detail, and you have all of those in your application materials as well. They go to great length, I think, to detail the business plan and the proposed uses of the property as they've been elaborated upon by Ms. Wagner this evening. Furthermore, both as the zoning administrator, as she is first called upon to do, and then the planning commission themselves found the application to be complete. And I'll just observe that in over 20 years of land use and zoning practice, I can probably count on the fingers of one hand the applications that have had the level of detail that this one has, and that includes applications I filed, so I'm guilty of that. You have in your materials the action of the Planning Commission. It was a unanimous recommendation for approval with, of course, a whole set of conditions that you have. We would ask the board to consider varying from those conditions in a couple of respects. The arguable impact of the use, it seems to me, is not about the number of customers that may come to the property on a daily basis, but rather the number of dogs that might be attempted to be kept on the property at any one time. Vice Chairman Light at the Planning Commission meeting last month, I think really zeroed in on this, and I thought made some really cogent observations about that was a condition that the Planning Commission should really consider, rather than some artificial, arbitrary limit on the number of actual customers coming to the property per day. Particularly given that, again, this property is on the only four-lane major highway that we have in the county. So the concern about people coming to and from the property, again, there's no conflict with any existing traffic patterns. So we would ask that the BZA make the condition set at a reasonable number of dogs at any one time. That would absolutely be a reasonable condition limiting the use and addressing some of the concern, although we don't believe the impact to be a real one. And rather not place a restriction on the maximum number of customers per day. You also heard, and I want to clarify this again, you heard from Ms. Wagner earlier this evening, the materials and application originally contained provisions about composting dog waste under the USDA guidelines. And after conducting their own study of their own business with their own animals coming to their business on a weekly basis, found that literally the amount of waste generated, which of course is picked up immediately and disposed of. It's not left out there to be out in the weather and to be run off into the local water supply or anything like that. But that waste is picked up and disposed of immediately and carted to the landfill. Literally, there is not enough waste. You have to have a certain, you probably all are aware of this, you have to have a certain amount of material, organic material for composting to even work. There's literally not enough for it to work. So in this case, the change in that would be that rather than composting, the waste is just picked up and carted away, as anybody would. Finally, just a comment on the perceived impact of this use on the local winery operation. It's worth observing, and I think some of the board members have commented on this already. That we already have a pretty substantial, large commercial enterprise in an agricultural zoning district right now, right next to this property. And it's one, as Board Member Pierce pointed out a little bit earlier this evening, it's one that you're not allowed to have any say over whatsoever. No regulation of any kind. The legislature in Richmond has told you that, and has told all the counties that. And so the activity that goes on there is one that they're just entitled to do, regardless of what you may think about it. I submit to you that the application that you have before you is one of a much more modest scale commercial enterprise. It is tailored to this property. It only utilizes a percentage of the property. It does not take a 22-acre productive agricultural use, as you can see from the diagram, and that it is appropriately scaled for an agricultural zone property. So we would urge your support and approval of this application. Thank you for your time. Yes, ma'am.
Do you know how many other kennels are permitted or dog training facilities, agricultural zones in the county?
We had conducted a survey where there were at least 4. Now, I don't know, I don't want to misrepresent. I don't know, I can't tell you that those kennels do training activities like this proposal involves. But there were at least, again, this was just through an informal contact with the zoning administrator. I know there were at least 4. Ms. Conley had an idea. Is that about right?
I know that there's 2 boarding kennels.
Yeah.
There's the other kennel
Yeah,
in
so
Castleton.
let's just say roughly 4.
And they're all in
There's the
agricultural
training that doesn't have to come back.
I think they're all in agricultural.
Yes, ma'am, they
Yes.
are. That's responsive to your question. They're in the act.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you, Mr. Brown. First, I want to, before she leaves, I want to.
And you can use the back.
Well, okay. Charlotte, I took a class from
Sorry.
Charlotte. She's a great trainer. She does
Can I
good
just
work. Now,
quickly
that's not the issue before the board.
I don't make her.
The dogs do bark. We had, remember Toby? He was the one who wouldn't stop barking. My dog, and every other dog in that place barked all night, and she had no control over it. But that was the first puppy class. I want to correct the record a little bit. She said there's a dedicated turn lane. There's not. It's nothing in the BDOT report that shows a dedicated turn lane. I actually drove there the other day and had to come off the right-hand travel lane to get into Captain Lane. She did say she wanted to have events. That's not a misnomer, not a misrepresentation. She didn't say she wanted to have them in Warrenton. She said she'd like to have in the future events, which could be rallies or those type of things where dogs come and compete and things of that nature. So that's another issue that she anticipates happening in the future. What I think we've lost tonight is focus, and I think Mr. Brown and I have maybe gotten back to where we need to be from as a matter of law, which is what lawyers do. It's not about whether Charlotte is a great trainer. My vet gave me your card as a great boarding facility. So Dr. Watts, you need to thank him. I would consider that because she, in fact, boards dogs overnight. But if I go on vacation, Toby could go there. That's a kennel. Now, what we have here is, I argue, a strange interpretation of the word kept. With all due respect, I know that I saw a post, I don't know how the email got on the public board, but it almost came across as an ultimatum. If you do this, Mr. McCullough, we'll do this. Well, he's done that. He said, what we believe this to be is a kennel, whether you like it or not, so vote your conscience, but this will be a basis for appeal. I can tell you, no matter how you vote, it can be a basis for appeal. So that's not a concern of anybody's view. The gentleman over here said that our property ownership has rights and responsibilities. I suggest that's exactly right. But when it comes to how people utilize their property, the only way we have it say as a public entity is through the zoning process. And that's why we have the Board of Zoning Appeals, who can come up with the laws and the standards that apply in zoning ordinances, so you all can look at what they've come up with in a public hearing. The Board of Supervisors, I'm gesturing to the sole member of the Board of Supervisors who was here and spoke and identified himself as that, to say, okay, what did they enact? Well, they enacted the term kennel. And I know you don't want to have Fauquier here, but as far as I understand, we borrowed heavily from Faulquier's zoning ordinance, almost word for word.
Copy their homework.
Yeah, I don't know that there's a change throughout the whole zoning ordinance from what Fauquier did. So you may hate them, but you love their zoning ordinance. You get that. And they saw a problem, and Ms. Kuntz raised the issue earlier, when a judge said, this is not a kennel, this is a training facility, and you all have not gotten a definition of that. So what did they do? They had public hearings at the Board of Supervisors level, had people with public input say, we don't think we should have training, or if we have a training facility special exception, it should be dictated as to what that definition is. We don't have that. So we're inserting that. Now, I was terrible in math and terrible in English, but I know where the verbs and the subjects are in this thing, and the term or is not a different whole set of definitions. It goes back to the kept, animals are kept for the purpose of blah, 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 or any commercial purpose. So it's one of many numbers of things that you can do at a kennel, but they must be kept there. And I went to Webster's Dictionary and got the word kept, and I gave it to you in that memo. It's taking possession. I've taken Charlotte's class. And when we went in there, she didn't say, Greg, give me your dog. She didn't want, oh, she did a couple times actually, trying to do that. But I would, if I left and she said, Greg, I'm keeping Toby overnight. No, you're not. It's my dog. So she didn't keep Toby. She didn't keep Winston. She didn't keep that good little dog you had that's already trained, so like the leader of the pack. But she's not keeping dogs, as the ordinary term implies. Now, if you look at Ms. Summers' letter, it was a little milk toasty, and I understand why, because it's you got a shoehorn. Somebody stole my word. You stole my word, shoehorn. She goes, well, this may not align with the commonly understood definition of kennel, for which the intent is to apply to animals to be boarded in the same way it's interpreted. Kept to mean boarded. Well, she landed on the issue here. That's what kept means. It means boarded. It doesn't mean have people bring your dogs, run around in the yard and try to train them, both the owner and the dog, and let them go back to Warrenton or Clevenger's Corner or Sperryville or wherever they go. So I get that. Now, the other concern we had, I think Mr. Lockerbie is in the place in Scotland?
Lockerbie.
Okay. He said, well, because it wasn't appealed, it is not binding. Actually, they've given you on the record like a position of the county. And to the extent that you have to take that or not, on appeal, a circuit court or Supreme Court, whomever, can look at what they said and say, was that a strange interpretation? And if they do, they'll reverse the Board of Supervisors, or Board of Zoning Appeals. They'll reverse the circuit court, which they did in the City of Falls Church, Cook versus City of Falls Church, BCA. They said, that's pretty strange. We had the same situation here back in, I think, 2002 when one of the breweries tried to get in here, and the circuit court judge said, no, that's a strange interpretation, Mr. McCarthy, and sent it back and denied it. So there is precedent under the law about looking at the interpretation and in the cool gray light of dawn saying, yeah, it's not really a kennel. So you can take that into account. Now the other things, there is a definition of kennel in the Rappahannock County ordinance, which is not the zoning, but it says whether you have to get a tag or a license. Dogs maintained in a kennel, as hereinafter defined, shall be exempt from license tax, but you got to pay, if you have 26 or more dogs, $50 a year or something like that. A kennel is defined to be a structure for the confinement of dogs consisting of walls or a fenced area where only one breed of dogs is maintained. So Charlotte will never have to pay any kind of license fee because she keeps more than one breed of dog. It's not a kennel, but it is a kennel, or is it not? Well, that's what you all are here to determine. Now I'm going to hit the highlights like Mr. Brown, he referenced my memorandum. And the application, I'm not going to make much of the lack of justification because in all my zoning work, that's a big deal. If you in your application, you've got to have a statement of justification under the comprehensive plan or it doesn't even get accepted. Well, we're so far beyond that. I'm not worried about that. That's the way I'm going to do it out here. That's the record. In the discussion, a kennel is defined as any place so designed that cats, dogs, or other household pets cannot escape, and where any number of animals are kept for the purposes, and we go through what we've talked about already. There's a condition preceding to us even considering us, meaning you all, the royal we, considering this. How many dogs does she intend to keep at any one time? Because there are special requirements, special standards that haven't even really been addressed by the group. And even to say that they're the vague term that is perhaps suggested by the authorities in the county is that this is a boarding situation. Okay, say it is for argument's sake. Doesn't get us past the other requirements, the other additional standards that you all must consider before you can grant her application. She's got to be able to tell us the number and types of dogs that are going to be in her kennel. And despite the fact that Mr. Brown made reference to this, well, they're not going to be in pens, but they really don't need to. Well, yeah, they do, because our Board of Supervisors said they do. So if you don't like it, that's great. Talk to Mr. Franklin, get other people on the board. Change this law, we got to have open fields for boarding and whatnot. But it hasn't been done. We're talking about what the nature of the definition is right now and what the standards you must look at. So she's got to come up with the number and kinds of dogs proposed to be kept at her facility. And all dogs shall be kept in pens designed to maintain secure confinement. And her application.
Dog in the pen.
Sir?
How does one train a dog if it's being kept in a pen?
You hit the nail on the head, because it can't. She can't be a kennel because it has to be kept in a pen, has to be a specific number of dogs, and she's got to be able to tell you what types of dogs. Under your own
You
rules.
can't hire fortune tellers.
Then
I mean, they just don't exist, and if they come up and tell us how many, we're not gonna believe them anyway.
Well, for instance, this lady here, legitimate business owner, and I hope she likes golden. So if she was to come to you and say, I'm going to breed golden retrievers, at any one time I'm going to have 10 dams and 5 sires, or whatever it's going to be, boom, she gets her permit. We can't do that here because it's not a kennel. It's going to be in flux. Every day there's going to be a Toby, there's going to be a Winston, and they're going to be coming in different places. And there's no way she can tell you today, which your all's rules and statutes require, and what they enacted require. You can't do it. And until she's got the burden of proof over here, not everybody else. And I disagree with Mr. Brown's interpretation that we just pay lip service to the comprehensive plan. Actually, the way I look at it, the Board of Zoning Appeals in a situation like this has an obligation to look not only at the comprehensive plan, but the zoning ordinances themselves. So if you get to the point where you're going to just kind of slough off the fact, there's no pins, we don't know what kind of dogs are going to be, we're going to go ahead and do this because she seems like a nice lady. If that's the way it's going to be, it's on the record. But I think it's an awkward place to put the Board of Zoning Appeals to justify granting this application as it's been applied for. But I want to hit a couple of high points about the comprehensive plan. We need to make land use decisions and plans that approve the conversion of important farmland to non-farm use only. You buy it. Only if overriding public policy needs exist to change that land use, development areas cannot accommodate a proposed new use, or extenuating circumstances can be shown to exist. We know we can put something like this in Perryville. She's already talked about it. The particular places she would like to use are maybe not necessarily at first blush the best. That's why we have commercial zoned areas. She's trying to, again, shoehorn a commercial enterprise into the middle of an agricultural district. To the maximum extent possible, separate or buffer incompatible uses from agricultural lands. You all have the obligation also to direct commercial and non-agricultural industries and business into existing commercial centers or designated growth areas. That's on you all. And you have to allow certain commercial development that by its nature, which is not this situation, must be located in sparsely populated areas near agricultural operations or existing neighborhoods or on specific sites to be so located if the development enhances the agricultural and tourist industry of the county. And this doesn't necessarily do that. The bottom line is there are so many things that cannot be shown factually at this particular level by the applicant. The number of nature kind of dogs, the requirement they be kept in pens, because if you're going to call it a kennel in the summer, you got to treat it like a kennel. And that's why we have the laws. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, you don't need to respond. Okay, so we will now close the public hearing and it will now come back to the board and we can now further discuss what action we wish to take. And we still have Mr. Lockerbie.
Yes.
Is available. Okay, looks like it's better to go home though.
You get your argument on.
I think he is.
Or he's been eating whatever. Anyways, Mr. Lockerbie, would you like to respond to either of the attorneys that made their presentation?
Not at all. I'm here to answer your questions.
So the answer is no, not engaged.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear. And my only question, and the other board members,
Mayor, when I first started working with you every so often on tough cases, if anybody's wondering, I've worked with you all for 6 or 7 years on the occasional case, probably once every year or two, where you really feel like you need legal counsel. So that's been a long-standing thing.
and I would point out that under today's rules or whatever, we don't have the privilege of using the county attorney for legal advice because he may in fact be, in a case, because the county government has the option to bring an appeal against the BZA. So he cannot be an advisor to us. That is why we have an attorney who is basically at our disposal. We don't have to make a request to the board or whatever. If we have a legal question, we have to have somebody to go to. Mr. Locke is the go-to guy. So, and we thank you.
The meeting is, the comments are closed and it's back to the meeting?
That's right.
I'd like to make a motion.
We have a motion, don't we?
Well,
it's been rescinded temporarily, but I'd like to make another motion. I move we approve it.
I second.
I move we approve the application.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any discussion?
I would just like to say this. When you look at the zoning in Rappahannock County, almost all of it is conservation and agriculture. As a county, we need some kind of commercial or fee-generating activity. Otherwise, we're just not going to exist. 20 acres, 22 acres to have a fee-generating or a farm that is sufficient to produce anything that will provide for anybody's living is simply not possible. And when we contemplate the zoning ordinance and the amount of land that's agricultural, the amount that's conservation, I think the Board of Supervisors recognize that there are certain times when we're going to permit activities which aren't squarely agricultural, and we're going to do that by providing for special exceptions or special permits. So that when you look at the grid, where certain activities are permitted, if you buy what I understand to be the definition of kennel, which includes any kind of commercial activity having to do with dogs, which I have to say, not a great definition, but nevertheless is what we have in our zoning ordinance, then this can be, this is one of the uses, and it preserves the view shed. It protects the mountains, the scenic ridge style. That's it preserves and protects the ground surface waters. It preserves and enhances rural agricultural and open spaces. It preserves air quality, limits noise and light pollution. It protects natural scenic and historic resources, thus ensuring high quality of life. There are very few enterprises that can have as low an impact on the land as this one. Not only do we have a very small section of it which is dedicated to, dogs and their owners, but most of it is going to be open. You guys are lucky. When you asked whether or not I would be happy to have Charlotte exterminate in this point, you bet I would, because you know what I have?
Give us some of your land. I'm sure you got a big piece of land.
No comments. Public comment is over, there will be no comments.
My understanding of the ordinance is that with special permits, special exceptions, special uses, that we are trying to balance, the need for some kind of economic activity while keeping the land in a rural and keeping that in rural nature. And I think we should be really happy that we have somebody who's under 50 years old who is willing to engage in an enterprise in this county that doesn't negatively impact either our rural nature, our scenic values, or the quality of our lives. And let's give her the permit.
I have another question I'd like to ask. Is there, when we're talking about commercial and agricultural, is there an agricultural business in this county that's not commercial? They wouldn't exist.
Oh, I think there's probably no. Unless
No,
it
no.
makes money.
Well, I mean, you gotta pay your taxes somehow.
Point of order, Chairman, we have a motion in a second.
Okay, and if you thought we were done, we're not quite done, sadly.
No, not
We have a long list of conditions that were sent to us from the planning commission that we're gonna have to go through and decide whether or not we're going to include them in our motion. So,
Did we finish the vote though?
No.
the
I
vote?
mean, we got two people voting. I think there were
We have a motion on the second.
No, the conditions are have to be part of the motion. I mean, they become
Okay.
part of the permit and have to be part of the motion. And, in my doing research on this and, looking around at other counties, we have been very lax in the wording of our conditions. I've read Faulkner's conditions. They are very specific. They aren't open. So, I mean, we have, conditions here that are very open-ended and virtually unenforceable. And if they're unenforceable, why should they even be in there? So that's why we need to go through these and we'll go through one at a time. The limit of 20 cars or customers per day. I have a problem with that from an enforcement standpoint in that the applicant has stated what her classes are going to be. That's contained in her information. And we don't have a bean counter that's going to stand there on the road and count cars or count people. And if you can't enforce it, don't put it in the ordinance or don't put it in the application. It's meaningless. So, and I will also say that next door, which we're not supposed to talk about next door, but they have unlimited cars going in and out. They're all day, and there's never been a problem there. So there's not going to be a problem with cars accessing the facility. So we'll take that one out.
Great.
20 dogs maximum throughout the day, no more than 10 dogs maximum at any one time. She has, there again, stated what her requirements are. This, again, would be not enforceable, so it doesn't need to be in there. The no overnight boarding is interesting because it says overnight boarding. It doesn't say anything about doggy daycare or whatever. If it's going to be in there, it's going to be take out the word no boarding and forget about overnight.
Right, they didn't want to do that anyway, so it's removed.
Okay, and I'd be in favor of that also, and that it's, she has stated that in her application that, there will be no facility for her to have boarding. But that requires kennels, and there are not going to be any kennels there, so.
It's just measured out.
So, take that one out. Maintain in health all existing trees and vegetation cover. Define.
Keep them alive.
Well, but what if they die? I mean, by that, they die by natural causes. Trees don't live forever, they die. And there again, how are you going to enforce that? Are you going to take pictures and then come by once a year and check on it or whatever? I mean, the trees are there. But yeah, someone may come down. She may have to take down a tree or two for, construction, or as trees die, it's better to cut them down than have them fall. So So, that's true maintenance on there, but there again, that's something that I think we need to be involved in. And it's not really a big issue. So, I agree. Right. Here's another interesting one.
I disagree. We have traditionally in this county, since we are now discussing a commercial operation on agricultural land, but traditionally in this county, for commercial operations, we have required buffering.
Yeah, I think that's the word.
Yeah, also,
Leave it in.
But if we are going to require buffering, then we are going to have to be specific on where the buffering is. We can't just say we require buffering. We're going to have to go and on the plat or on the plan there, plot out where we're going to require the buffering.
Yeah, but I think Charlotte has already done that
I've already put Tracy.
in the application.
Well, okay, yes, you have put your buffering on there.
Yeah.
So we can require that buffering to be in place. But to have the thing, all existing trees and vegetation cover, it's a big property.
we have an ash point now. Trees are falling down right and left. There's no way that you could save an ash tree today, we're dead.
What about maintaining?
And they're gonna be falling down through years now.
That's designated
There's no way
in the
around it.
application.
Yes, that'll work.
Maintain a buffer is designated in your application.
Okay. Next one. No training of police, detective, or personal protection dogs. I don't know what that means. Police dogs are, a lot of them, some of the best trained, gentlest dogs you ever want to find until you tell them, to do what they're designed to do. And also, I mean, there are retired police dogs that could come forward. And so, in detective dogs, I don't know what those are. And, personal protection dogs. Well, actually, you may in fact be training dogs that are, all dogs can be personal protection dogs. I mean.
Can I answer that? Okay. So like.
Discussion is closed, sir.
It's an
That's the applicant. They're working on
Yeah,
the
they have to
applicant.
do whatever they want. Oh, I'm having a gun range in stuff.
Because personal protection dogs are considered essentially a weapon, it's something that we don't work with, and we actually push clients away and say that we don't work with protection dogs because the liability and the accountability of the owner to be able to handle essentially a loaded gun is not something that I'm interested in.
Okay, no training of personal protection dogs.
Leave that in. Leave it in.
Well, I was talking about the detective dog. Detective dog, I don't know what that is.
Well, that's a drug sniffer.
Well, that's a police dog, isn't it?
No, those are the ones that ride around cars and.
Okay, we'll leave it on there, that's not good. Hours of operation, yes. Permit expires on the sale of the business of the property, yes. The protected dog fencing around the entire dog training areas, buildings, parking area, that's kind of hard to.
That's
envision.
actually, I think
I
it's
think it
in the
needs to be in there,
design.
but I think it, I would put in as proposed by the applicant. No use of capital money for business, not a problem. And then the staff conditions, which repeats the no overnight boarding and breeding of animals, compliance with all state and local ordinances, pet waste disposal shall comply with guidelines outlined. I think we leave that in even though she's not going to be utilizing it, but it's a good backup. Within 1 year of the issuance of this permit, an approved septic solution has been permitted, installed, and approved to include standard restroom facilities, flush toilet, hand sink at a minimum. We need that in, and compliance with the land, or the lot and land layout, so that it's part of the application package. We'll leave that in there, and it's covered specifically in a couple of areas. So, that being said, we have a motion to approve with
Given these conditions. And we have a second.
I
We have a second? So roll call vote. Start with the,
I'd like to note that I think the application was very well put together. I think you're probably great at what you do. It's obvious by everybody in the room. I just have a lot of issues with the definition and the additional standards as outlined. I can't even get to the general standards because I can't get past or I can't even meet the additional standards at all. And so it's very hard for me to approve this. I also can't get past you can do what you want to do by right in a commercial zone, and you wouldn't have to be at this board or have any of this controversy. I'm not in favor of conversion of the agricultural land. So with that, I vote to deny.
And I agree, I vote to deny on the same basis.
I made the motion, I vote in favor of approval.
I'm going to vote in favor of it, but I still have questions in regards to the applicability of the 170-49, but that can be dealt with in other manners, so I'm going to vote in favor. So the motion passes.
I think we can still refer to the supervisors asking them to clarify this and clean up with the regulations.
That we can do. Okay, so we're not done quite done for us. We'll take just a second for anybody who wants to leave. We've got a couple of house matters to take care of. Okay, we're coming back. We're going to be a second here. So.
Okay, take your time.
I need to get the last, a quick,
This is going to be
With that.
Under old business, we've got updated the rules and procedure that we talked about last time. And in thinking about it, and planning, so as we redoing zoning, there's no sense in us doing anything that the code has done because it could end up being that we make changes in our procedures that are immediately outdated because you're updating the code. So I'm just deferring it for a later date.
Okay. And also, it's the question of whether or not the whole public hearing, the planning commission
Yes, and that's, this is what we're going to do. Okay, so, and that's just an update, so we don't go on that. There's no new business, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Do I hear a second? All in favor?
Ooh, we're good with this. That's a long one.
This is a big jump over.